Our reading today on the second Sunday of Christmas, the first Sunday of 2022, is set from John's Gospel. It's the opening chapter, John chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. Before the world was created, the Word already existed. He was with God, and he was the same as God. From the very beginning, the Word was with God. Through him, God made all things. Not one thing in all creation was made without him. The Word was the source of life, and this life brought light to mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has never put it out. God sent his messenger, a man named John, who came to tell people about the light, so that all should hear the message and believe. He himself was not the light. He came to tell about the light. This was the real light, the light that comes into the world and shines on all mankind. The Word was in the world, and though God made the world through him, yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own country, but his own people did not receive him. Some, however, did receive him and believed in him, so he gave them the right to become God's children. They did not become God's children by natural means, that is, by being born as the children of a human father. God himself was their father. The Word became a human being, and full of grace and truth, lived among us. We saw his glory, the glory which he received as the Father's only Son. John spoke about him. He cried out, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'He comes after me, but he is greater than I am, because he existed before I was born.'" Out of the fullness of his grace, he has blessed us all, giving us one blessing after another. God gave the law through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only Son, who is the same as God and is at the Father's side, he has made him known. It's really difficult to immediately pitch in to how amazing this passage is. The different strands that it deals with, the theology that it expresses, the cosmic concepts that it destroys for the first people who heard this. There's such a lot in it, and John has managed to get an incredible amount of profound truth into just those 18 verses. For you and I, in a post-resurrection age, a lot of this stuff sounds quite straightforward and mainstream. John espouses that Jesus Christ is God in person, in physical form. And again, in a post-resurrection age, that's something we take for granted. It's a fact that we understand and believe. Jesus was no mere copy. Jesus wasn't playing at being human whilst being utterly divine. Jesus was God in human form. And in all of the stories, in all of the Gospels of the healing miracles and what Jesus said and did, and how he behaved and how he treated everybody, he gave us the example of how God relates to people. God is a God of love. God is a God of universal acceptance and grace. God comes to each and every individual, including you and I, and wants us to come home to where we were meant to be. Jesus came so that God would be here in the world to show people like you and me what God is really like. And for those who looked upon Jesus' face without any preconceptions, without any judgment, without any tradition, without feeling offended by their own sense of importance, those who could look on the face of Jesus in his earthly life and respond with wonder and awe and amazement and joy at the things that he did, restoring the sight of the blind, restoring to health those who were physically compromised, proclaiming deep truths, proclaiming assurance and peace and strength for all the people who could look upon Jesus and recognize in him glory and wonder and something profoundly wonderful. Then there was indeed a new relationship, and people, we're told, were born again in a way that Nicodemus could never understand when Jesus told him that fact. But of course, that's what this is saying. Jesus was God, and we're pitched into this cosmic saying about the Word, the creative force of God that existed before anything else, because how could anything exist without the creative force of God? So God made all things, and the same God who did that became human in Jesus. And he did all of that so that we could see light and life in the world, and so, of course, that we may believe. If you go right to the end of John's Gospel, you'll remember that there is that wonderful verse that says, "This book has been written so that you may believe in Jesus Christ and have life." And that's what it's all about. So concisely, so precisely, John gets across the point that the Word became flesh means the creative force that is God became human. So all of the different strands of theology, all of the heresies that the early church had to deal with about people thinking about Jesus being either totally divine or not human, or totally human and not divine, could be washed away. But the other thing that's really striking, of course, about this reading is the context into which it comes, and the context into which even you today may still have this division between heaven and earth, which is very much part of Greek and Roman philosophy and religion, and is the cornerstone, if you like, of most religions, that there is a heavenly place set above the world, that the world is essentially a messy, physical, horrible place where all sorts of terrible things happen, and that above us all sits this wonderful, sinless, glorious, pure and brilliantly white place to which we may ascend or go at some point through some means. That's the main stay, if you like, behind most religions, and certainly Greek philosophy that poured into Roman thought too. The gods are above us, and we mere humans are their playthings, and if we're very, very good in some way or other, we may eventually get to be with them or be like them. And John totally and utterly destroys that philosophy. He totally and utterly counters and says things to those who have that attitude of understanding of faith or religion, that this is no longer true. There is no longer a strict division. The world was in the world. God comes to the world. More than that, God becomes a human being. How can that be? That's so contrary to everyone's ethics and everyone's religion of the day. God becomes personal and close and real and intimate, that people might know God in their lives. And that is our great good news, of course, that through Jesus we see God in human form. We understand what God is really like. And again, if we look at the life of Jesus, all we see is non-judgmental acceptance, grace, love, but a passionate pursuit for what is true, what is good, what is right, what helps, what builds up, what encourages, and what is strong and what is pure. And a constant calling to look beyond ourselves to the cosmic nature of God and to rest in God's arms. Religion is now right at the end of our noses. It is there for each one of us individually, not distant and remote, not something that needs to be earned by religious practice, but by surrender and acceptance, and by an understanding, a childlike understanding of how much we are loved by God. Rather than working it out through our own intellect, we are to accept what is before us, which is the simple truth that the God who made all things loves us, that we are special to that God, and that love, if we let it enter our hearts, can blow away all that logic and all that reasoning. Remember Thomas in the upper room, who no longer needed to put his hand in the side of Jesus or touch the scars on his hands, because he'd seen Jesus and he understood. My Lord and my God, he says. So it is with us. I love the first words, before the world was created. There's such an enormous amount of literature in the science journals these days about the age of the universe and the Big Bang Theory, whether the Big Bang Theory holds water. I mean, it's still the best theory we've got, but it has significant holes in terms of the fact of, the universe being bigger than it actually should be, given the fact that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, the fact that the universe is incredibly flat, and the fact that the temperature of the universe is uniform. None of these things really make any sense when you think about the singularity of the Big Bang exploding out into space. But quantum physics, of course, tells us that it's perfectly understandable and predictable that matter should appear from nowhere. So we have this marvelous idea, and inflation is a theory which obviously goes to explain something about those deficiencies in the Big Bang Theory, and hints at the fact that it's quite possible that there was a cycle of flattening everything, recreation, flattening, recreation, forever and for eternity, and that the universe we live in, the thing that we've aged at 13.8 billion years, might just be one of an infinite number of phases, let alone a parallel universe and parallel worlds theory. So our grasp of reality is so partial. And in the person of Jesus, God comes to us and makes all these things rest on a relationship. Not on a cosmic explanation of, it's this many years old, and this is exactly what happened, and this is why there are this many heavy elements in the universe and this many small ones. None of that stuff, that logical, that reasoning, fascinating though it is, and important and great to do, that's not where we look for meaning. That's not where we look for understanding, because clearly our scientific understanding of the nature of the universe, of creation, is incredibly limited. We know very, very little. We postulate a lot, but the more we explore, the more we uncover. And I don't think it doesn't seem to be that we're going to get to any kind of absolutes about creation. So this whole idea of trying to understand everything and therefore finding your place in the universe, that can never happen. You have to also recognize that we're using our own brains to analyze that data. So we're kind of limited by our own creation. God comes to us in the person of Jesus and simply says to us, you are loved. You are a special child of God. God made and formed you from the dust of the stars, and you are loved. And that's really all you need to know.